to the Snakeherder Podcast.
Hello, and thank you once again for joining me for another Snakeherder Podcast. My name is Matt Nauman, and I'll be your host as usual. A big thanks goes out to my announcer Blake, that's my son, who is doing another fantastic job of enthusiastically welcoming you back. And another thank you to my friends at Reptile Rapture in Monona, Wisconsin for their involvement and their encouragement in this project. Very good people to have behind you. So anyway, just a quick word about some of the forthcoming episodes, what we're going to be doing in the future here. I've got some really awesome interviews lined up for some episodes coming up, and just hasn't worked out with my schedule yet to do one. And so this is going to be one more where it's just me talking about my opinion on a subject. So I hope you'll bear with me for this one, and I hope you find it interesting, if nothing else. So anyway, we have some really cool interviews lined up, though, in the near future. I'm going to be talking to some great people in the hobby, and hopefully they'll have some interesting things to tell us all about, and you'll have some more people to look into next time you're considering some animals, or next time you have questions, or anything like that. So anyway, what's today's episode about? We're on episode 3 here. We're going to talk about the ball python market, where it was, where it is, and where I think it's going. Kind of a big topic to try to tackle, and I'm probably going to skim over a lot of things because I just don't want this to be an all-day affair of me talking about my opinion of what happened and what's going to happen with the ball python market. But kind of a touchy subject for some people. Some people get real uppity about this. I don't think it's the big deal that everyone likes to make it out to be. And so we're going to just discuss what I think is going on with it and where it was when I got involved in the hobby. So I think that's a good way for us to start, is we'll start with the past so that we can better understand where we are now and better speculate where we're going to end up in the future. So when I started keeping, it's far from the beginning of the hobby. Obviously, the hobby predates my birth. I was born in the 70s, and people were keeping and breeding snakes back in the 60s and 70s. And so, I can't claim to have been involved since the beginning. But when I first really got involved was in the 90s. In the mid-90s, when I was still in high school, was when I got my first ball python. And the books that you could get off the shelf in a pet store at that time that would sell these snakes would be, they would have things like pictures of piebalds and albinos. And at that time, albinos went for tens of thousands of dollars. Piebalds in these books, I'm sure I have a couple of books around the house that show a picture of a piebald and say that the pattern of inheritance hadn't been proven yet, and they assumed it was an anomaly and couldn't be reproduced. So it was, when I first started paying attention to this was pretty early on, I guess, realistically. And the spread of information was not what it is now. You didn't have the internet where people were just, sharing information like crazy and you were seeing pictures. I mean, you had a few books to choose from, and the rest of it was like word of mouth and attending things like expos were your best bets, and good luck finding an expo back then. So like I said, the few morphs that were being imported into the country, I mean, even the normals that we were buying back then were mostly imported. The morphs that were coming in were only available to a select few people. I have no idea how you got into that circle, how you got, they bought these things on descriptions usually because you couldn't just email pictures back and forth in a matter of seconds. So people were spending big money on things that were unproven, and we didn't know anywhere near what we know now about ball pythons. So in a lot of respects, it was kind of a rich man's game. And not necessarily that everybody who was doing it was rich, but you had to be willing to invest big, and you had to be, you had to be within a group of people that was going to be able to sell these things for huge amounts of money should you be able to reproduce it. And it wasn't the slam dunk that it is now. I mean, and even now, if you're working with wild-caught animals, you don't have anywhere near the same degree of certainty that you can reproduce something. I've even had good captive bred animals that I've bought that for one reason or another were poor growers or feeders and just didn't breed well for me. So, I mean, there's still always a gamble. You can't just guarantee everything you buy is going to be a good breeder and give you a return. But back then it was an even riskier proposition, I guess, is what I'm basically trying to get at there. Now, when the internet came along, that pretty much changed everything. Now, information was out there for everyone to find, and it was so much easier for everybody to network. Became along with overnight shipping, when people started being able to ship reptiles across the country overnight, that really changed everything. Now it was so much easier for people to acquire things if they were interested, and so the network got bigger, and the interest in the hobby got bigger, and competition started to get bigger as well. As the popularity grew and more people joined the hobby, there was a boom in sales, but this was also the beginning of this growth of breeders that were never there before. And now the information was there to share a lot higher level of success. People had started to do things the right way, or a way that worked, and now they were able to get that information out there. So people were learning how to, avoid a lot of mistakes. It was taking people a lot less time to go from buyer to breeder. And, I guess, just as an example, I started breeding at a really cool point in time about 10 years ago. And it was really cool because that was a time when the demand was way higher than the supply in general. You bought things knowing that they were going to go down in value before you reproduced them, but still they didn't go down by 50% in a matter of a few years. So you had to reproduce maybe 2 of any given codom to pay off the original investment in one of the adults. And from there on out, you just made money on them outside of the costs of feeding them and, of course, establishing babies and marketing them and all of that. So, I mean, realistically, when I talk about making money on them, I don't mean, like big profits. I'm just saying that you're coming out on the plus side overall. You're doing a lot of work, but you're getting something in return for it, and you get the enjoyment of producing baby snakes. And if you can't afford to keep all of them, you're still able to find them homes and make a little bit of money back at the same time, which to me, that's what it's always been about. That's always the win for me. I've always looked at my past success as the fact that I don't currently own a single ball python I ever produced. Every one I ever produced, I was able to sell. And that's really a pretty cool thing. Now, since that time, there's been so many more breeders who have joined the, or I should just say hobbyists who have joined into, keeping and breeding ball pythons that we're getting to where supply is starting to outnumber demand in a lot of respects, at least with like single gene animals. I mean, it's not easy to sell a big pile of, let's just say Mojaves, for example. When I first started producing them, I could sell every one I produced for good money pretty easily. Now they're going to go for way less money, and it's really hard to find somebody unless they just happen to really like the appearance of that snake. And usually at that point, then you're talking about somebody who's not going to breed it. And so it's gotten to where now, people complain a lot about this big influx of breeders, saying that they're the ones who ruin the market. But the fact of the matter is they also fueled it. The people who, all the new breeders that some of the older breeders like to complain about, well, without people weren't buying $1,000 snakes just to look at them. They were buying them because they like to breed them as well. And they were looking to, have their own projects and potentially turn their own profit on them. So, you really can't complain about your own customer base is the way I look at it. I think that maybe too many people try to do it in too big a numbers right off the bat is one of the issues I see. If everybody just bred a few pairs of snakes every year, I think we'd be in a really cool spot. But most people, and it is, I hesitate to use the word addictive, but I mean, just when you enjoy ball pythons and you have so many appearances that you're exposed to, it's a really easy impulse when you have rack systems where adding an animal doesn't seem like a big deal. It's really easy to want to have one of everything you like, and there's just no way to do that without working with just obscene numbers. And it's really hard to keep yourself in check and work with a reasonable amount of animals. So so in the meantime here, there's all these new breeders who are buying into things on the lower end as prices come down. The people who'd been in it the longest at this point are starting to pile on the genes, and they're starting to produce 4 and 5 gene animals. And that's kind of where we're getting to be right now, where that's becoming normal. The trick is getting to be, a lot of people have a bone to pick with the fact it's really hard to tell what you have sometimes when you have that many genes all piled on. I'm finding less and less that I care less and less about what specifically is in there. There's always going to be some recognizable ones, and then if there's some maybes, to me that's cool as long as the final result is something really cool looking. And then you just price something based on what you're willing to take in exchange for it. That's the thing that I always, people get really specific about what market value on something is. They love to bite your head off by either saying, I can get these for way less than that somewhere else, or else to say, hey, you're priced way too low. You're trying to kill the market. And it's just, to me, everything comes down to what it's worth is what somebody's willing to pay for it and what you're willing to accept for it. And it's not a real tangible thing. I don't believe in just saying, you're ruining the market if you're selling your, whatever more for less than the guy next to you. It's just, and again, I can certainly understand how people who do it for a living get irritated when somebody comes into the hobby, invests in one morph, and then just produces the heck out of it and more or less tries to, they're going to have an effect on the overall value of that. I don't think one person so much, but if a whole lot of people were to do that, say you get a new gene comes out and a whole lot of people invest in it at once and plug it into every female they have, obviously you're going to have a negative effect on the market. So I understand the complaint, but it's just, unfortunately it's in everybody's hands to show a little bit of restraint and, a little discretion. And I think most people who are actually investing and doing this stuff are putting their heads in the right place. I think that it's just easy to create an invisible enemy. And, I don't know any of these breeders that people love to complain about, that they say, all these new guys who come along and they just flood the market with this gene or that gene. I haven't met anybody yet who's done that. So, it's an easy thing to just assume is happening and to vilify. And I think it's kind of a waste of energy, to be perfectly honest with you. There's actually an upside to the fact that the market has come down the way it has. When I first started taking an interest in this hobby, it took thousands of dollars to own a snake with any kind of morph. Now, if you want to spend a couple, $200-$300 now, you can own something that's several genes, codom or dominant, or else you can get into a single or possibly double recessive, or single recessive with a codom with it, something like that. It's only a matter of a few $100s. So the cool thing is that now as a buyer or as a keeper, there's so much available to us now for very reasonable amounts of money. And by all rights, that's the kind of amounts of money that it should cost. There's, outside of the fact that somebody had to pay big to import something, there's really not a good reason that any one given snake should be tens of thousands of dollars. It's kind of silly, if you want to ask me honestly. Sorry, I don't mean to step on anybody's toes. If you insist that the value of a snake is entirely in dollars and cents, and you want to be able to say, hey, this is a however many tens of thousands of dollar snake, well, if that's what it takes for you to enjoy keeping, who am I to take that away from you? But to me, it's not about world's firsts, and it's not about, how big a price tag you can attach to something. It's just when we're producing really cool looking animals that are easy to home, and, it's just, and they're just the perfect sized and temperament snake to keep. I just think it's just a cool hobby, and there's no reason to get too caught up in the money side of it. So, I think that this so-called market crash has kind of been a really cool thing for the average keeper. Maybe not so much for the person who breeds for a living. So anyway, that's kind of where we've gotten to now. So where do we think it's going to go from here? Now that is a pretty hot topic in terms of what a lot of people think. There's one thing that I hear from time to time, particularly on social media, that I do not agree with at all. Once in a while you hear people say all these new breeders are going to sell their collections and bail on it, and the prices are going to come back up. Now, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but prices are not going to come back up. There's just not a situation where the supply and the demand don't hardly change and suddenly the price changes in that direction. It just doesn't happen. So kind of what you have is worth what it is now, and it'll be worth less in the future, more likely than not. And that's just the way it is. Yes, that's just my opinion, but I just have yet to hear a valid argument that supports the idea that for some reason the value on something is going to go up with regards to python morphs. So what snakes are going to be your valuable snakes in the future, I guess, if that's what's important to you? I think that the multiple recessives are going to always be the most valuable. When you get double, or even if you're lucky enough to do triple recessive, the amount of time involved to produce it always makes them lower in supply. And when you get really cool results, then expect to sell them for a good price. So that's always going to be your best bet if you're trying to make money. As far as if you want animals that are easy to sell, you can sell several for less money and probably less work realistically. The multi-codoms, I think, are always going to be popular just because of the variety and the people who want to, if you're going to just breed one or two pairs, why not just do a couple of multiple codoms, not just so you can try to produce something with 15 genes piled on, but so that you could breed it for several years in a row, and no two clutches are going to be alike necessarily. When you have several dominant and codominant genes piled together, that's the cool thing, is the unpredictability. That's one of the reasons that I'm trying to work with animals with so many genes. Isn't that I'm trying to get all those genes on one animal. I just want to see how many combinations. I was looking at a potential pairing of, I've mentioned it before, of a banana enchie yellow belly to my cinnamon enchie female, and I came up with approximately, I believe I came up with 24 different visible outcomes that are possible from that cross. And that's just one cross. And when you're talking about 5 to 8 eggs on an average clutch, then it could take you several years to see all of those. And it's just that's going to be a cool thing for those of us who are not looking to do it for a living and who just want to have cool projects. That's a really cool way for us all to enjoy the hobby without having to spend a truck. Meaning the amount of money it would take to buy a truck is what it used to cost to have a caramel albino project. That's just, we're in a much cooler place realistically, if you ask me. So, I'm really, and with regards to the whole newer breeders thing, there is a possibility that a lot of people who bought into it early, who thought that they could just make it a quick, easy, self-employment kind of situation, there are going to probably be people like that who bail on the hobby all at once, or else, and there's always the people who are going to start to buy into there's starting to be a stigma with the ball pythons. People look at them as beginner snakes, and they cite all the bickering and the ridiculousness on social media that kind of has affected the way people look at ball python breeders. And I've just decided to look the other way, and I couldn't care less anymore what anybody else's opinion of what I do is anymore. I just know that they're the animal that I enjoy keeping the most, so that's what I'm going to work with primarily. But there's always going to be the people who buy into that, or else who have a genuine growth in their interest and what they want to work with regards to wanting to be challenged. So they move on to things like, other species, either larger species or ones that are rarer. if there's going to be that as well, but I don't think that's going to have. I think that we're still going to always be gaining new members in the hobby, especially because of things like YouTube and just Facebook. So I think we're gaining people faster than we're losing them still. It's kind of tricky to say where we're going from here. Again, I don't think prices are going to go up, but I don't think they can come down too much more. My biggest fear with prices coming down, honestly, has more to do with normals. I enjoy producing normals. I think they're just as enjoyable to see come out of the egg as anything else. But I worry about selling them for small amounts of money, not because I need to make profit, but because I'm afraid that people who only invest $20 or $30 in a pet that can live 40 years might not take it seriously enough, and I don't want them to be treated as disposable animals. So that's my biggest problem with producing normals. I could really honestly enjoy doing it all the time if I just knew that they were all going to a good home and that I didn't have to worry about how they were treated after the fact. One of the other questions I wonder sometimes is, you get these really large facilities, and I don't mean to criticize them because some of my friends run some very cool, large facilities, and I wonder if there's a point at which they're going to reach critical mass, because it seems that the best way for them to continue making money anymore is to work with or produce more every year than the year previous. And you can't help but wonder, you can't produce more every year, especially when you're producing thousands, without eventually getting to a point where you almost kind of have to balance out again. So, I'm kind of, I don't know where that's going to end up. The other thing too is I hear people talk about importing animals still. And, as you'll hear people refer to dinker projects, and I just don't see a purpose in it anymore. Honestly, I just feel like, we've kind of seen, we have enough to work with here. We have a perfectly reasonable captive collection that, there's no reason to try to achieve any more diversity than what we have, honestly. I just can't see a good reason for people to import anymore. So that's kind of where I'm at with the future of it. I guess I gave a kind of inconclusive opinion of it. I don't see a huge change, I guess would be the best way for me to put it. I think that, prices will continue to trickle down essentially. There will always be a few snakes that are worth a lot of money, but and I think we're going to continue to gain new members to the community, just like we have for the last several years, and it's going to balance out with the people who leave the hobby. So let me know, what do you guys think about all this? Do you think that we're, what do you think is going to happen with the future of the hobby, I guess? Do you think people are going to continue to spend large amounts of money? Do you think there's going to be a big shift in interest from, say, recessives or multiples or anything like that? Or do you think that we're all just going to see a continuation of what we've already seen, just that the animals are going to get cooler because there's going to be more and more genes involved? So, I guess realistically in that respect, that could be a really cool thing. We could just see what, I would be perfectly happy to see the hobby continue the same route that it's on right now, just with more variety and more to choose from, and, more cool things being produced for more reasonable prices. To me, that's win-win for everybody. But what do you guys think? Email me at snakeherder@gmail.com, and, or message me here, message me wherever. Go to Facebook and check out Snakeherder Constrictors. Send me a message there. Let me know what you thought of this topic. I guess I can't spend all night. I realistically could spend all night talking about this, but I don't want to, beat this to death. It kind of, the early part of what I talked about kind of just is what it is. It's where the hobby was and what I observed in the time that I've been in it. As far as the future, though, that's really just a lot of speculation. So I'd like to hear what other people are speculating. What do you guys think is going to happen to the prices? Do you think that, is something going to change, or is it just going to be there's going to be more to choose from? So anyway, that's going to about wrap up my whole past, present, and future view of the ball python market. So hopefully really soon I'm going to get an episode up here with an interview piece with my first interview that I plan on doing is with my friend Paul Zulke of Key Reptiles. And he's a really cool guy, and he's got a lot of animals that I produced. He's bought a lot of my personal breeders, and he's going to be bringing me something new the next time I see him, which I'm really excited about. And he's got some cool projects, more than just ball pythons. He's got some hognose and some other things that I'm going to let him tell you guys all about. And it'll be interesting for you guys to be able to hear somebody else talking other than me for a change. So keep an eye out for that. I hope to get that up and recorded really, really soon. In the meantime, thank you once again to my friends at Reptile Rapture, and thank you guys all for tuning in as always. I'm really happy that you guys are listening, and we will expect to hear from me again real soon. All right, thanks a lot. This has been another Snakeherder Podcast.